Here's something that will permanently reframe how you think about your body after 60. A landmark study published in The Lancet tracked over 140,000 adults across 17 countries and found that grip strength, the force in your hand when you squeeze, predicted cardiovascular mortality more accurately than blood pressure. Not your cholesterol panel, not your BMI, the squeeze in your hand. Most men over 60 have no idea their body is broadcasting silent biological signals every single day. Signals that separate the men who are quietly thriving from the ones slowly declining without realizing it. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The men losing that race usually look fine on the outside. I'm Marcus Reid. I'm 58 years old. What I'm sharing today are 7 silent signs, most of them invisible in the mirror, that your body is aging better than most. Sign 4 surprises almost everyone I share it with. Sign 7 is what I call the invisible report card of your entire nervous system. And I'm saving the best for last, a single force multiplier habit that the research shows activates the biological cascade behind all 7 signs simultaneously. Signs 1 and 2. Your grip is solid and your muscles still respond. Let me tell you about Raymond. He was 67 when he first walked into my gym. His doctor had told him his blood work was fine for his age. But Raymond could barely open a jar of pickles without wincing, and stairs felt like negotiating with a stranger. He assumed it was just aging. It wasn't. It was myostatin. Here's the mechanism. As men age, your body ramps up production of a protein called myostatin, a biological brake that actively suppresses muscle growth and accelerates muscle breakdown. Think of myostatin as a speed limiter on your engine. The engine can run harder, but something inside is deliberately holding it back. The counterforce to myostatin is a pathway called mTOR. The mammalian target of rapamycin, mTOR, is your muscle-building master switch. When you expose your body to adequate mechanical load through resistance training, mTOR activates, protein synthesis accelerates, and myostatin gets suppressed. The silent sign here is grip strength, because it correlates almost perfectly with whole-body skeletal muscle integrity and functional independence. If you can hold a dead hang for 20 seconds, carry 2 full bags of groceries without switching hands, or squeeze above 26 kilograms on a dynamometer, your mTOR pathway is working. Your myostatin is controlled. That is not a small thing. Raymond spent 6 months on a structured resistance protocol, 3 to 5 heavy compound movements, 3 days per week, with deliberate emphasis on slow eccentric lowering to maximize mechanical tension. His grip went from a 21 to a 34. He carried his granddaughter up a full flight of stairs. More importantly, he stopped thinking of his body as something that was failing him. But strong muscles are only half the story, because living inside those muscles is an organelle most men have never considered, and it's the real scoreboard of long-term aging. That's where we go next. Signs 3 and 4. Your heart recovers fast, and you can get off the floor. Meet Daniel. 63 years old, former accountant, never an athlete. He came to me after a study rattled him. Researchers in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology followed over 2,000 adults and found that men who couldn't sit cross-legged on the floor and stand back up without using their hands had a 5 times higher mortality risk over the next 6 years. Not 20% higher, 5 times. The mechanism behind that test is mitochondrial density. Your mitochondria are the energy-generating factories inside every muscle cell, the power grid of your biology. When that grid is strong, your muscles fire with precision, your balance is reliable under load, and your cardiovascular system snaps back after exertion. When the grid is degraded, you lose power in layers. First in the small stabilizers of your hips and core, then in your cardiovascular reserve, then in your functional resilience. The floor test and your heart rate recovery are both direct readouts of your mitochondrial power grid. A heart rate recovery of 15 or more beats per minute within the first minute of stopping exercise is a strong indicator of cardiovascular health and autonomic balance. Men who hit both benchmarks are, by most biological measures, a full decade younger than their chronological age suggests. Daniel trained for mitochondrial density with a protocol that research consistently validates. Zone 2 cardio, 3 times per week, 35 to 40 minutes each session, at an intensity where conversation is possible but slightly labored. Within 4 months, he cleared the floor test without hands, and his 1-minute heart rate recovery improved by 22 beats. His comment to me, "I feel like I got my engine back." But the third cluster of signs lives somewhere most men never look. Not in the muscles, not in the heart, but in a measurement most doctors dismiss as cosmetic. Signs 5 and 6, your waist is under 40 inches and your sleep is deep. George came to me at 71. Lean by most standards, 6 feet tall, 185 pounds. But his waist measured 41 inches, and he couldn't figure out why. His diet was clean. He exercised. His doctor called him healthy. I recognized it immediately as a cortisol signature. Here's the biology. Cortisol, your body's primary stress hormone, has a specific anatomical target: visceral fat, the deep abdominal fat that accumulates around your internal organs. When cortisol remains chronically elevated, through insufficient sleep, unmanaged psychological stress, or overtraining without recovery, your body preferentially deposits fat in the abdomen, regardless of your overall weight or caloric intake. This is not a vanity issue. Visceral fat is metabolically active tissue. It secretes inflammatory cytokines, disrupts insulin sensitivity, and drives cardiovascular risk in ways that surface-level body fat simply does not. A waist circumference consistently below 40 inches in men over 60 signals that your cortisol to testosterone ratio is reasonably balanced, and your chronic inflammatory load is under control. Now here's where sign 6 enters, and this connection is one most men never see. Deep sleep specifically, slow-wave sleep in stages 3 and 4, is when your pituitary gland releases the majority of your daily human growth hormone. Growth hormone is the primary driver of overnight cellular repair, lean tissue maintenance, and visceral fat metabolism. Men who consistently sleep fewer than 6 hours, or who get minimal slow-wave sleep, are essentially blocking their own nightly hormonal restoration system. The result accumulates over years and shows up directly on the waistline. If you wake up most mornings feeling genuinely rested, not just functional, but clear and ready, that is a silent biological signal that your hormonal recovery architecture is intact. Pair that with a waist below 40 inches, and you're operating in a physiological category most men in their 60s haven't reached. The final sign, sign 7, is the one I consider the most sophisticated of all. And in a decade of training older men, it's the clearest separator between the ones who are truly thriving and everyone else. Before I get to sign 7 and that force multiplier bonus, I want to stop and ask you something honest. Of the 6 signs we've covered so far, grip strength, muscle response, heart rate recovery, floor mobility, waist measurement, and sleep quality, which one hits closest to home for you right now? Drop it in the comments. Not for engagement, because naming your specific weak link out loud is the neurological first step toward addressing it, and it helps me know exactly what to cover in the next video. Sign 7. Your mental sharpness hasn't dulled, it has deepened. Frank was 68 when he came to me. Fit by every external measure, solid grip, healthy waist, good sleep. But he noticed he was slower to recall names in conversation, slower to make decisions under mild pressure. He assumed it was just the territory of getting older. The science says otherwise. BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, is what neuroscientists call fertilizer for the brain. It stimulates neurogenesis, protects existing neurons, and strengthens the synaptic connections that define cognitive speed and working memory. Men who maintain structured cardiovascular exercise, particularly Zone 2 cardio and high-intensity interval training, show significantly elevated BDNF levels compared to sedentary peers, even well into their 70s. The silent sign here is not raw intelligence. It's processing speed under low to moderate cognitive load, verbal fluency in real conversation, and the ability to absorb new information without significant frustration. If your wit is still sharp, your recall is reliable, and you're still learning new things without hitting a wall. That is not luck. That is BDNF. That is a protected prefrontal cortex and an active hippocampus. That is the biology of a brain that has been exercised as consistently as the body around it. Frank added 2-0-minute high-intensity interval sessions per week to his existing routine. 4 rounds of hard effort, followed by active rest, cycling between 85 and 90% of maximum heart rate. Within 8 weeks, his verbal recall noticeably improved. Within 4 months, he described feeling mentally 10 years younger. His words, not mine. One habit. It costs nothing. It takes 90 seconds. And the mechanistic research shows it activates the biological pathways behind all 7 signs at once. Cold hormesis, finishing every shower with 90 seconds of cold water exposure. Here is why it works across the full spectrum. Cold exposure triggers a surge in norepinephrine, a catecholamine that reduces systemic inflammation, sharpens attentional focus, and suppresses chronic cortisol over time. It also initiates mitochondrial biogenesis. Your cells build additional mitochondria in response to the controlled thermal stress, which directly upgrades your cardiovascular recovery capacity. Post-training cold exposure reduces inflammatory cytokines and accelerates muscular repair. And critically, consistent cold exposure trains vagal tone, the resilience of your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the same mechanism that drives heart rate recovery. 90 seconds. Cold finish. Every morning. One trigger that touches your mitochondrial density, cortisol management, post-exercise recovery, and cognitive sharpness simultaneously. This is not a biohack. This is precisely applied thermal biology. Here is what I want you to take with you. The fact that you are still here thinking critically about myostatin and BDNF and cortisol signatures, applying science to your own biology, already places you in a category most men your age are completely unaware of. You're not chasing youth. You are engineering longevity with the precision of someone who understands the machine they live in. That is not average. That is the top 5%. Not because of genetics, not because of luck, because of intentionality. The best decades of your physical life do not have to be the ones in your rearview mirror. For most of the men I train, the ones who show up, stay curious, and take these signals seriously, the strongest years are still ahead. Build the body that earns the life you actually want to live.